what's the point of it all? What is even the point of it all? So the point of RPGs varies by game. You will not be surprised to know. Different RPGs will emphasize different aspects of the hobby, and there's going to be a lot of overlap because it is fundamentally all role-playing. So at its most base level, you are trying to tell a story. But different RPGs are going to have different focuses, and that is going to emphasize how the game is meant to be played. Dungeons and Dragons as a franchise has throughout its history been extremely combat focused. If you've ever played D&D, you probably know this. Which is not to say you can't do anything but combat. That is obviously not true. But when 90% of the game's rules focus on one aspect of gameplay, you can really easily tell that's what the game is about. So D&D is about fighting. More broadly, I would describe the focus of D&D being that it is a power fantasy. Your characters are there to be strong. They are there to make a difference. They have agency fundamentally, and they are going to overcome dangers and challenges principally through fighting monsters or bad guys. You can call it a naive type of story if you like. I am kind of a sucker for the classics. I've never gotten tired of high fantasy. I incorporate themes of like destiny and, strong good and evil motifs in my campaigns. So that type of campaign really sings to me, which is why I play D&D. There are other ways to play RPGs that I think other systems do much better. So I think if you ever are playing a non-combat focus, something that doesn't emphasize the balance of good and evil, something that doesn't emphasize combat quite as much, D&D probably isn't the system for you. There's other systems that do other themes a lot better. Subterfuge, if you're doing like a heist game, consider a game like Blades in the Dark. Or was it like Dust City or something like that? There's another one. I have never played it, but I've heard good things about it. Like there's other heist games. If you want to play like a drama, like a social drama, consider something like Legend of the Five Rings. It's such a good system for doing like social, not just like subterfuge and like not espionage, that's not the right, like not just intrigue, but also just like social role-playing in general. It's such a good system for that. It's really built from the ground up to emphasize that aspect of play over others. If you want a sci-fi game with like, the space opera, consider something like, let's see. So if you want something like Firefly, you could do Scum and Villainy. If you want like a real space opera, you could do like, Embers of the Imperium, something like that. There's Cyberpunk if you want that. There's so many Cyberpunk RPGs, actually. I could probably think of like 3 or 4 off the top of my head. But the point is, if you're not going to do what D&D does best, maybe don't play D&D. But if you are going to play D&D, I think it's important to understand and recognize the kind of gameplay that D&D encourages. Which is to say, it is not power gaming, but the power fantasy. Because you don't have to power game to have a power fantasy. A well-designed game lets you fulfill a fantasy even if you aren't like really wrenching down and manipulating the rules, which is what power gaming is about. It's about finding the combos, finding the like really wielding the system in order to maximize potential. You shouldn't have to do that, and in most RPGs you don't. I'm trying to think if 5th edition actually falls into that category. It's very easy to optimize in 5th edition. Like, it's a thoroughly solvable system. It's one of the more solvable RPGs out there. Like, there's definitely RPGs like Monster of the Week is very, very easy to break with regards to like character builds. But in these like narrative based systems, you have, let's call it player buy-in. Like you understand that the narrative comes first, and so there isn't really this drive to optimize your character, to make it busted, unless that is really just the joy that you get from playing RPGs. D&D, on the other hand, is explicitly about overcoming challenges. And that's the main way that the player characters interact with the world, is by encountering and overcoming obstacles and challenges, usually in the form of killing monsters. So in that light, players are encouraged and incentivized to really fine-tune their ability to overcome these challenges. And that manifests as finding the parts of the system that are strong and using those parts. And that can be seen as power gaming. And I think the term power gamer comes across as a bit of it's got a negative connotation, doesn't it? Like, oh, you're a power gamer, all you care about is winning, as opposed to the people who care about like the story and the development. And those two are very much not mutually exclusive, but also the power gamer, I think, can be forgiven for ignoring the parts of the game that the book practically ignores. And I think the idea that you shouldn't try to, like, I don't want to call it winning at D&D, but like, you can win at D&D, right? You can make a character that is able to hold his own, to overcome the challenges. And like, if you are beating every challenge, then like, if you're in it for the power fantasy, that feels really good, right? That is the goal for most players, is to overcome these challenges and move the campaign forward. And the story can just kind of happen. That's usually, like, in my experience, nearly all D&D campaigns, the story proceeds at a particular pace, and you interact with it, of course. Like, it's not just narrative, or it's not just narration, I should say. But like, in order to get to the next part of the story, you have to beat the challenges. It's kind of video gamey in that way, if you think about it. There's a lot of video games where like, oh, the story's going to happen, and now you do some gameplay, and then more story happens. And that's just sort of the way that D&D has been run for pretty much the entire time I've been playing it. 3rd edition, 4th edition, 5th edition, like, that's kind of the way that it goes. I should do a video about, on a related topic, about the initiative system and what it does to narrative play. But anyways, what I'm getting at is that there is this idea that power gamers, optimizers, whatever you want to call it, people who want to try really hard and make characters that are super effective, are playing the game wrong in some way. And as someone who likes winning, I sort of resent that a bit. That like, there is, because the idea then is that the only way to play is to not really interface with the game's systems. And that seems like a really weird assumption to have in a game, that like, oh, don't try too hard or the game falls apart. And I feel like that must be a symptom of bad game design. But maybe that's just me.